I'm a customs officer in Singapore, and last month an American came through carrying a pack of chewing gum in his jacket pocket. When I confiscated it, he actually laughed at me. It's gum, he said. I'm not smuggling heroin. I explained it's banned here. The fine starts at $400. He pulled out his phone and started Googling right in front of me, reading the law aloud like he'd discovered some loophole. Says here therapeutic gum is allowed, he announced. This is for my jaw tension. That's therapeutic. I pointed to the Wrigley's spearmint logo. He insisted tension relief counted as therapy because his American dentist recommended chewing gum for TMJ. When I asked for the dentist's documentation, he said it was verbal advice, so no paperwork exists. He genuinely believed the word therapeutic meant whatever he decided it meant at the moment. 20 minutes of back and forth before he paid the fine, still muttering about how Singapore takes gum too seriously. My cousin works at a museum in Florence, where they've banned eating on the cathedral step. She's dealt with Americans who think eating doesn't include their gelato because it's technically a dessert. One woman got defensive when asked to move. I'm not eating, I'm tasting. There's a difference. In America, tasting means sampling, which isn't the same as consuming a meal. She'd bought a full cone, was halfway through it, but insisted the distinction mattered legally. Another tourist tried to argue that since gelato melts, he was drinking it, not eating it. The law says no eating, and this is a liquid now, he explained, holding up his dripping cone. My cousin showed him the fine print explaining that all food and beverages are prohibited. He asked to speak with whoever wrote the law because clearly they didn't account for dairy-based product. These people genuinely believe their interpretation supersedes the actual legislation, as if laws are just suggestions waiting for an American to correct them. I work at a train station in Japan, and an American asked me why everyone was so quiet on the platform. I explained that talking loudly is discouraged here. She looked around, then back at me. But it's a public space. The First Amendment protects speech in public spaces. I said we're in Japan. She nodded slowly like I was the confused one. Right, but the principle still applies. Freedom of speech is universal. I learned that in high school civics. She genuinely thought the U.S. Constitution followed her internationally like some kind of invisible diplomatic immunity. I tried explaining that different countries have different standards of public behavior. She cut me off. That's exactly why America leads the world. We figured out rights first. Then she took a phone call on the train, speaking at full volume about her hotel Wi-Fi password, while every other passenger avoided eye contact. She never once considered that her understanding of universal principles might not actually be universal. I'm a police officer in Dubai, and last winter an American couple was holding hands near the Dubai Mall fountain. A colleague asked them politely to refrain from public displays of affection. The man responded, "We're married. You can't arrest people for being married. We explained it's a cultural norm here, not about marital status." The wife pulled out her marriage certificate from her purse like she'd just played a trump card. "We have documentation," she said. "This is legal in every country we've visited." My colleague clarified that legal marriage doesn't override local public conduct laws. The husband interrupted, "So you're saying marriage is illegal here? That doesn't make sense. Marriage is literally recognized by the United Nations. I'm pretty sure that's in the Geneva Convention." He'd somehow conflated international marriage recognition with immunity from local decency standard. His wife added that they'd held hands in France and nobody said anything, so clearly this was targeting Americans specifically. They couldn't grasp that different countries have different thresholds for public behavior, even between legally married people. It took 15 minutes before they agreed to just walk side by side instead of intertwined. My brother manages a hotel in Reykjavik, and an American guest complained that the check-in desk wouldn't hold his luggage for 5 days while he toured the countryside. When my brother explained they only store bags for 24 hours, the man said, "But I'm a paying customer." Consumer protection laws say you have to accommodate reasonable requests. My brother clarified this isn't about consumer protection, it's hotel policy. The guest insisted hotel policies can't override statutory right. I looked this up before coming here. Iceland has strong consumer laws. You can't just refuse service. My brother showed him the posted storage policy in 3 languages, including English. The man squinted at it and said, "This says 24 hours, but that's probably a mistranslation. In America, consumer rights include storage for the duration of your booking period, and since I booked 5 days, you're technically obligated." He'd invented this obligation entirely. My brother asked him to show the law he was referencing. The man pulled up a travel blog from 2019 written by someone else who'd misunderstood the same policy. "See? It says right here hotels in Iceland have flexible storage rules." He was citing a stranger's incorrect blog post as legal precedent. He ended up paying for 2 nights at a storage locker downtown and still left a 1-star review claiming Iceland discriminates against Americans. I work at a public park in Melbourne, and an American jogger got irritated when I asked him to leash his dog. He gestured at the open grass. There's nobody around. Leash laws only apply in crowded areas. That's standard everywhere. I explained our leash laws apply at all times unless in a designated off-leash zone. He looked at his phone, pulled up Google Maps, and zoomed in. This shows the whole park. There's no label saying it's an on-leash area, which means it's neutral territory. In the absence of signage, freedom of movement applies to animals. I pointed to the sign 10 meters behind him listing leash requirements. He glanced at it, then back at me. "That's for aggressive dogs. My dog is friendly. The law needs to specify non-aggressive animals, otherwise it's unenforceable against me." He decided friendly temperament exempted him from compliance. I clarified that temperament isn't relevant. He asked for my supervisor's name and title because he wanted to file a complaint about selective enforcement. In America, you can't enforce laws based on feelings. You need objective criteria, and friendliness is objective. I gave him my supervisor's information. He never followed through, but he did leash the dog while muttering about how Australia doesn't understand legal nuance. I'm a clerk at a government office in Oslo, and an American came in for residency paperwork. The appointment notice said to bring 2 passport photos and 3 forms of ID. He brought 1 photo and his driver's license. When I explained he was missing items, he said, "I brought the most important stuff. The rest is optional unless you specifically say mandatory." I pointed out the email he received specifically listed required document. He scrolled through his phone, found the email, and said, "This says please bring, not you must bring." That's a request, not a requirement. In legal terms, please indicates a suggestion. He genuinely believed polite language meant optional compliance. I explained that in Norway we phrase official requirements politely, but there's still requirement. He shook his head. That's a communication issue on your end. If you want something mandatory, you need to use mandatory language. In America, government forms always say required or mandatory in bold. I showed him the checklist on our website with the word required next to each item. He squinted at it and said, "That's the website. The email is the official communication. If there's a discrepancy, email takes precedence. That's basic contract law." He decided his interpretation of communication hierarchy overrode explicit instructions. He rescheduled for 3 weeks later and still left annoyed that we didn't accept his driver's license as sufficient proof of identity. I manage a restaurant in Stockholm, and an American asked for tap water. When I brought it to the table, he insisted I bring a pitcher instead so he could refill it himself. I explained we don't typically leave pitchers on tables. He leaned back in his chair. In any developed country, unlimited water refills are guaranteed. It's a sanitation standard. You're telling me Sweden doesn't have sanitation standards? I clarified that we have sanitation standards, but we serve water by the glass. He waved his hand dismissively. That's inefficient. Efficiency is part of service quality, and service quality is regulated by EU Consumer Protection Directive. I'm pretty sure making customers ask for each glass violates efficiency standards. He'd fabricated an entire EU directive based on his assumptions about efficiency. I brought him another glass of water. He shook his head. I'm going to need that pitcher. I have a medical condition where I need constant hydration, so denying me access is technically discrimination. I asked if he had documentation of this condition. He said it was a privacy matter and he didn't need to disclose medical information to justify basic right. He was essentially claiming disability accommodation for wanting self-service water. My sister works at a bakery in Vienna where tipping isn't customary. An American couple left a €10 note on the table and walked out. My sister ran after them thinking they'd forgotten their change. The man looked confused. That's your tip. You can keep it. My sister tried to hand it back. The woman stepped in. In America, refusing a tip is actually illegal in some states. It's considered wage theft because tips are part of your expected income. By refusing, you're participating in a labor violation. My sister explained she receives a full salary and doesn't rely on tip. The woman shook her head slowly. That's what they tell you, but labor laws are designed to protect workers even if they don't know they're right. You're entitled to this money, and we're entitled to give it to you. It's a bilateral transaction. She was treating her desire to tip as a legally enforceable transaction. My sister tried explaining that Austrian labor law doesn't work that way. The man interrupted. We're not here to change your system, but our money, our rules. Once we hand it to you, it's yours, and refusing it is basically theft. He'd convinced himself that refusing a tip was the equivalent of stealing their money. They left the cash on the counter and walked away, clearly feeling like they'd struck a blow for workers' rights despite being told the worker didn't want or need the tip. I work at a cafe in Buenos Aires, and an American ordered a cortadou, then asked me to remake it because there was too much milk. I explained a cortadou has a specific ratio, and what he wanted was closer to an espresso. He pulled up a photo on his phone from a New York cafe. This is a cortadou. I've had hundreds of them. This is the standard. I told him that's an American interpretation. He set his phone down emphatically. Coffee drinks have international definitions. A cortadou is defined by the International Coffee Organization. You can't just change the ratio and call it the same drink. I told him no such organization exists. He Googled it right there and found some trade group he claimed validated his point. See? This website says coffee standards exist to prevent consumer confusion. What you served me causes consumer confusion, which is against trade regulations. He believed consumer confusion was a legal violation he could invoke at a cafe in Argentina. I offered to remake it with less milk. He said that wasn't the point. The point was that I needed to acknowledge his definition was the correct one. He wanted a formal apology for serving him a drink that didn't match his expectations, as if expectations were legally binding standards. I'm a bartender in Prague, and an American ordered a beer, then complained it wasn't cold enough. I explained Czech beer is traditionally served cool, not ice-cold. He touched the glass. This is room temperature. There are health codes about beverage temperatures. Serving lukewarm beer violates sanitation laws because bacteria grow faster at higher temperatures. I told him beer is preserved by fermentation and alcohol content, not refrigeration. He wasn't convinced. In America, the FDA regulates this. Cold chain requirements apply to all consumable liquids. I'm pretty sure Europe has equivalent standards, or you wouldn't be in the EU. He decided beer temperature was a public health issue. I brought him ice cubes. He dropped them into the glass and said, "This is what compliance looks like. I shouldn't have to fix your health code violations." He drank the watered-down beer while explaining to his friend that Eastern Europe hasn't caught up with modern food safety standards, completely ignoring that he was drinking a product with centuries of brewing tradition that predated his country by multiple lifetimes. He left convinced he'd uncovered a systemic sanitation issue that Czechs were simply too backward to recognize. I drive a taxi in Bangkok, and an American passenger asked me to take a shortcut through a restricted neighborhood. I explained it's forbidden for non-residents. He sighed heavily. "I'm paying for this ride, which makes me the client. Client priority overrides zoning restrictions. That's how transportation contracts work." I tried explaining that local traffic laws supersede our fare agreement. He pulled out his phone. "I'm looking at the map right now. That road is public. Public means accessible. You can't restrict access to public infrastructure without federal approval. I don't see any federal signage, so it's fair game." He'd invented a rule about federal signage based on nothing. I told him I'd lose my license driving through there. He shrugged. "That's a licensing issue, not a legal issue. Licenses are regulatory, laws are statutory. Regulations can be challenged if they prevent legitimate commerce, and my fare is legitimate commerce." He was treating his taxi ride as some kind of legal test case. I drove the long route. He spent the entire trip explaining that in America, drivers don't refuse passengers without cause, and his cause was valid because he was the customer. He left a 1-star review claiming I didn't understand contract law. My uncle works at a train station in Brussels, and an American asked why the platform signs were in French and Dutch but not English. He said, "This is an international hub. International hubs are required to have English signage under global travel conventions." My uncle explained Belgium has 3 official languages, and the station displays those. The American looked around. "But English is the universal language. Not having it excludes English speakers, which is discrimination. I'm pretty sure the EU has rules against linguistic discrimination." My uncle clarified that linguistic discrimination refers to employment and services, not voluntary translation. The man pulled out his phone. "I'm reading the European Convention on Human Rights. It says everyone has the right to access information. By not providing English, you're denying me access." My uncle pointed to the digital boards showing train times in multiple languages, including English. The man squinted. "Those are times, not directions. I need directions in English, and your maps are in Dutch. That's a navigation barrier, which affects accessibility." He decided his inconvenience qualified as a human rights violation. My uncle offered to help him find his train. The man declined and said he'd file a complaint with the EU directly because this was clearly systemic discrimination against Anglophones. He never filed anything, but he did miss his train while photographing the French-Dutch signage as evidence. I'm a metro worker in Sao Paulo, and an American couldn't understand why his credit card didn't work at the ticket machine. When I explained he needed to buy a transit card first, he said, "Credit cards are accepted everywhere. That's the point of Visa and MasterCard. If your machine doesn't take cards, it's non-compliant with payment standards." I showed him where to buy the transit card. He waved me off. "I'm not buying another card. I already have a card. Payment interoperability is required under international banking regulations. Your metro is violating those regulations." I told him there are no such regulations for local transit. He insisted there were. I worked in finance for 3 years. I know how this works. Every card reader globally has to accept major network. That's what makes them major. I explained that transit systems use proprietary cards for tracking and security. He shook his head. Security is your problem, not mine. My card has a chip. That's secure. You can't make me jump through hoops because your system is outdated. He stood at the turnstile for 10 minutes trying to wave his credit card over the scanner like it would magically work if he tried enough times. Eventually, he bought the transit card, still insisting São Paulo's metro was breaking international law. He left muttering about how developing countries ignore global financial standards, despite Brazil having one of the largest economies in the world. I work at a tourist information desk in Marrakesh, and an American asked for walking directions to the Medina. I gave him a map and explained the best route. He studied it, then looked up. This shows a lot of narrow streets. Are these ADA compliant? Because in America, pedestrian routes have to meet disability access standards. I told him the Medina is a historic site with traditional architecture. He frowned. Historic doesn't exempt you from access laws. UNESCO probably has requirements for this. I'm pretty sure if you're a World Heritage Site, you have to meet international accessibility standards. I explained that UNESCO designation doesn't mandate modern infrastructure changes. He tapped the map. So you're saying disabled people just can't go here? That's exclusion. Exclusion violates human rights conventions. Morocco signed those conventions, right? I confirmed Morocco is a signatory, but that doesn't mean retrofitting centuries-old streets. He looked genuinely baffled. In America, we'd get sued for this. Historical preservation doesn't override disability right. I think you need to check with your legal department because this is a liability waiting to happen. He was convinced that American legal frameworks applied universally and that Marrakesh's Medina was one lawsuit away from being rebuilt. He took the map and left, still talking about how someone needed to file a class action suit against Morocco for inaccessible medieval architecture. I'm a border agent in Copenhagen, and an American arrived with expired travel insurance. When I mentioned it was required for entry, he said his policy was only 3 days expired, and 3 days doesn't count as expired under grace period provisions. I asked what provisions. He said, standard contractual grace periods. 15 days is normal. That's how contracts work. I told him travel insurance doesn't have statutory grace periods. He pulled up his phone and showed me his insurance app. It says here my coverage was valid through last Tuesday. Today is Friday. That's within a reasonable window, and reasonableness is a legal principle. I explained that expired means invalid. He looked at me like I was being deliberately obtuse. But I paid for it. Payment creates a binding obligation. They can't just cut me off the second it expires without notice. That's a breach of good faith. He wanted me to accept that expired insurance wasn't really expired because he felt it should still count. He spent 20 minutes arguing that European Union entry requirements were negotiable if his reasoning was sound enough. Eventually, he bought new insurance at the airport kiosk and still complained that Denmark was being inflexible about technicalities.